Okay, so we are live. How are you? Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. I'm trying new software things per usual. So, let me turn that off. Okay, so how is everybody? It is Topic Tuesday, and I am so happy you're here. Every Tuesday, I come on here live at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time to talk about something ADHD related. And so today we are going to be talking about ADHD and fixation mode, or that's what I call it anyway. So, have you ever gotten so locked into an idea or a problem or a task that the world sort of disappears, right? And we sometimes we'll call that hyperfocus. And sometimes it feels amazing, right? We are focused and we are so productive and we are getting things done. And other times it can leave you feeling really stuck, drained, or ignoring things that actually need attention. So today I'm going to break down what this is and why our ADHD brains like to do this and what we might be able to do to put some guardrails around it, if you will. So, what does fixation mode feel like? So it can feel like hyperfocus, right? It kind of is hyperfocus, I think. But anyway, it's hyperfocusing on a task, um, losing hours without noticing. It can feel like that. It can be replaying a thought or a conversation or a problem in a loop, right? You know what I'm talking about. We'll talk about this in a minute. Struggling to let go of something, even when you want to switch gears. And it can be feeling frustrated if you're interrupted while you're in this mode because the pull of the fixation that you have is so strong. And so it's not always a bad thing, right? Like I said, sometimes the fixations help us to get things done, right? You can be really super productive when you can get into that mode and you are working on the correct things. But it can also mean that your laundry will sit there for hours or days or weeks, whatever. And it's because you got stuck researching dog food brands or something. So let's take a look at why ADHD brains tend to fixate on things like this. So first, dopamine drivers. That's always the biggest thing, right? ADHD brains need stimulation. And so when something finally clicks, our brain latches onto it like there's no tomorrow, right? They just are like, okay, this is what we're going to do because it feels really good. You get all this dopamine. Task switching struggles. We've talked about this in the past about struggles with transitions, right? Shifting gears for us often takes extra effort. And so, once we're in, right? Once we're kind of in that fixation or that hyperfocus, it's sometimes just easier to stay in that than to have to switch gears. And when I said earlier about getting frustrated, right? When somebody interrupts. So think about if you have kids, you'll know what I'm talking about in particular. When you have kids and they're on a video game and you're like, okay, come on, put it down. We got to get, ready for dinner or whatever. And they get super irritated. That's part of that, right? Because you've interrupted this thing that's making them feel really good. And you actually have to kind of ease them out of it. And we have to ease ourselves out of it, which we'll get to in a second. There's also the emotional intensity of, fixations sometimes are about solving a problem or replaying a moment because our emotions amplify it. So think about when maybe you've gotten into a fight with somebody or if somebody made you angry and we kind of do this rehearsing the fight that will never happen usually. But we can't stop thinking about it, or maybe we did have the fight and we think about all the different things we should have said or, could have said and whatever. And we just sort of, ruminate on that and it keeps us stuck. It keeps us really stuck. And sometimes this happens because it relieves us from overwhelm. When you're just focusing on one thing, right? It can really, it can feel safer than, veering outside of that. So this isn't a pathology. It's just your brain's doing what it knows how to do, right? This is a very ADHD thing. And it is holding on to the thing that feels the most important right now. Remember, in ADHD world with time, There's now and there's not now, and not now doesn't exist. So this is really important right now. All right. So how do we work with fixation mode? That is really the important part here. The first thing is naming it. And you'll hear me say that a lot with a lot of these things. When you catch yourself in that mode, just name it. Just say, yeah, I am in fixation mode, right? It just sort of takes it anytime you name anything like this, it just creates a little bit of distance and it makes it so that it feels a little more objective, right? You're not it's not as personal. And I think I talked about that before in a previous topic Tuesday. It just makes it less overwhelming, and that's really what you're looking for, is to reduce that overwhelm, reduce the mental load. Um, you want to use external supports. I talk about externalizing as much as possible to get it out of your head, right? So I've talked about externalizing your thoughts, externalizing accountability, externalizing support. So it can be timers, alarms, body doubling, just something that will remind you to check in with reality, right? So if you feel like you're in one of these modes and you kind of want to sit with it for a little bit, that's okay. I just don't want you to get stuck there, but maybe set a timer and label it that says, okay, time to get back to reality now, that kind of a thing, right? So that it is less, you're giving yourself that space to explore it a little bit. And then you want to channel it intentionally. So like if this is a good one, like if you're locked in on something productive, ride that wave, man. Just ride it as long as you can. Well, except that you do need to take breaks. You know me. You got to take the breaks. I talk about that a lot. Taking breaks, learning how to take breaks, even 5-10 minute breaks, and not waiting too long to start your break, right? It just helps to reduce your chances of getting all burned out on this topic. So it's better to, as much as you can ride it, make sure you take the breaks, because if you take the breaks, especially if you're, let's say you're doing something for work, your work's going to just be better. It's just going to be better because you gave your brain a break, right? And that is something that I just know works really well. Sorry, I need some water. The other thing you want to do is maybe give yourself sort of a gentle off ramp, right? So sometimes the idea of just letting it go feels very final, and we're not quite prepared for that. So maybe you can jot down some notes about it, or leave yourself a sticky note, or schedule some time to come back to it. And then that way your brain doesn't feel like it's just been cut off, right? It doesn't feel like it's losing anything, because you're going to come back to it. And without a sight, out of mind, if you lose the note, then you might not. And then it might actually, depending on what this is, that might be a good thing. But if it's a good thing that you're working on it, just make sure you don't lose the note. Ask me how I know this. And the other thing is just build a little variety into your day, right? If you can add a little novelty, a little flexibility, it just reduces the chance of fixating over one thing, or fixating over everything. But, let me rephrase it. It will reduce the chance of you fixating on one thing that will take over everything, right? Like laundry, like, other things you may be needing to do at work. The fixation part of it can be really strong. And so when you can just add a little novelty, throw in a few things here and there just to change things up, to give yourself a little dopamine, so that maybe your need for dopamine isn't what is causing part of this fixation. It helps. So again, fixation, you're not broken. I know I say this all the time, but you're not. It's just your brain is working in an ADHD way of engaging. And sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's a headache. I've definitely been there. But when you start to build that awareness, right, and then add those supports, it is helpful, because then you're learning to work with it, right? I'm very big on the self-awareness aspect of all of this, because until you know what your patterns are, it can be really hard to put guardrails around the things that you have challenges with. So that's why I sort of say, like, so for example, what are the types of things that you find yourself going down a rabbit hole in, right? Like, um, what are typical things that you tend to get fixated on? And what is something that has helped you maybe get out of that fixation mode? The more you start to notice what your patterns are with all of these things, then you can go, oh, you know what? I really notice that when I am doing X, Y, or Z, I get fixated on X, Y, and Z, right? Or A, B, and C, whatever. Anyway, so then you can say, if it's a good thing, then you can say, you know what? That's good. That's the thing that I know is a good time for me to work on really um, heavy subjects that I know I need a lot of mental capacity for. But if you say, but actually, this thing is actually a distraction, then you can say, okay, so I know that. So I need to put guardrails around it so that thing doesn't show up and I can work on the things that I need to be working on. I hope this makes sense. Anyway, so what is the funniest rabbit hole you have ever gotten fixated on? And again, what is one thing that has helped you out of fixation mode? I think that we can really help each other out when we share these things because they are very everybody has their own unique twist to things, which I think is really fun. And I always love learning what other people do too, because there's no one size fits all for any of this. Wouldn't it make life so much easier if there was? But alas, no. So anytime people can chime in and say, "Oh, you know what? This is something that has helped me get out of fixation mode." Going back to the kids thing, just in case you have kids, this is something I do want to share about this. Um, you know, uh, Kids have practically been, they've been growing up with screens since they were born, basically, my kids' age. And one of the things that I learned in terms of trying to get my kids, especially one of my kids, kind of out of I'm in game mode into, oh, I'm a kid again mode kind of thing, is when you go in, like maybe if they're sitting on the bed playing a game, just go in and sit with them for a minute. Don't talk to them, just sit there. And they start to get a little bit of an awareness that you're there. And then maybe you put your hand on their back, right? Or just something that sort of physically is saying, okay, I'm here. And then that brings them out a little bit more, allow that to happen for a while. And then maybe say, hey, how's the game going? Are you winning? Talk about the game a little bit. And then you can eventually say, okay, now it's time to maybe get off, right? So we can also apply that to ourselves, right? It seems almost too simple, but I did find it to be incredibly effective when my kids were younger. So that's just a little side note on that. All right, so I think that's it. This is the first time I have done this with this setup, so hopefully this will continue. My dog's about to start barking because the mail lady's here. So anyway, I'm going to sign off now. Have a great week. If there's anything that you want me to cover on Topic Tuesday, let me know and put it in the comments. And there we go. Anyway, all right. Have a great week, and I will see you next Tuesday.